Most men lose control of their minds before they even leave their bed. The moment their eyes open, the invasion begins. Notifications, noise, anxiety, comparison, pressure, a flood of other people's opinions entering their consciousness before they've even spoken a single word to themselves. They wake up already reacting, already tense, already emotionally pulled in 10 different directions by a world that never stops demanding their attention. And without realizing it, they spend the rest of the day recovering from a battle they already lost in the first 5 minutes of the morning. This is why so many men feel exhausted before noon, not because life is too difficult, but because their minds are undisciplined. Their inner world has no structure, no order, no command. Their emotions wake up before their principles do. Their impulses wake up before their discipline does. And slowly, day after day, they become strangers to themselves. Stoicism teaches something radically different. It teaches that the first victory of the day is not external, it is internal. Before you answer emails, before you speak to anyone, before you touch your phone or step into the chaos of the world, you must first take command of your own mind. Because if you do not govern your thoughts, the world will gladly govern them for you. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. Every morning, he reminded himself that he would encounter difficult people, disrespect, selfishness, arrogance, ignorance, and chaos. Yet he did not prepare with fear. He prepared with discipline. He understood that the war begins before sunrise, not outside, inside. Most people think strength is loud. Stoicism teaches that true strength is silent. It is the ability to remain calm when everything around you demands a reaction. It is the ability to sit in silence while your mind tries to pull you toward distraction, anger, regret, or fear. Modern life is designed to fracture attention. Everywhere you look, something is competing for your focus. And attention is no small thing. Your attention becomes your life. Whatever controls your attention eventually controls your direction. This is why so many people live reactively. They are emotionally available to every opinion, every insult, every inconvenience, every piece of bad news. Their peace depends entirely on circumstances they cannot control. Stoicism rejects this way of living completely. The Stoic understands that peace is not found in controlling the world. Peace is found in controlling yourself, and that control begins in the morning. There is a reason disciplined men protect their mornings so aggressively, because the morning reveals who is truly in charge. A weak mind reaches for stimulation immediately. A disciplined mind reaches for awareness. A weak mind searches for escape. A disciplined mind prepares for reality. A weak man asks, "What will the world give me today?" A Stoic asks, "Who will I choose to become today?" That is the difference. One lives by reaction, the other lives by intention. Every sunrise presents a choice most people never realize they are making. You can begin the day unconsciously, allowing emotions, distractions, and impulses to lead you wherever they want, or you can begin the day deliberately, reclaiming authority over your own thoughts before the world has the chance to shape them for you. This is why the ancient Stoics valued solitude so deeply. In solitude, a man hears himself clearly. No performance, no validation, no noise, just truth. And truth is uncomfortable for most people because silence exposes weakness. It reveals dependency. It reveals insecurity. It reveals how addicted the modern mind has become to distraction. But the Stoic does not run from silence. He trains in it. He sharpens himself in it. While the world sleeps, he prepares his mind like a warrior, sharpening his blade before battle, calmly, quietly, intentionally, because he knows something most people never understand. Your life is not built during dramatic moments. It is built in the small, repeated rituals nobody sees. The way you think each morning becomes the way you live. Your thoughts become actions. Actions become habits. Habits become character. and character becomes destiny. This is why morning discipline is so powerful. It is not motivation, it is identity construction. Every morning, you either reinforce weakness or reinforce strength. Every morning, you either train your mind to obey impulses or train it to obey principles. Most people never pause long enough to question the voice inside their own heads. They simply inherit mental chaos from the world around them. But Stoicism demands awareness. It demands that you examine your thoughts before believing them. It demands that you stop living emotionally and start living deliberately, because a man who cannot govern himself will always be governed by something else, by fear, by comfort, by anger, by other people's approval, by distraction, by addiction, by emotion. This is why the morning matters so much. It is the doorway into the rest of your life. And if you enter that doorway unconsciously every single day, eventually chaos becomes your identity. But if you enter it with discipline, clarity, and purpose, something begins to change inside you. Slowly, your mind becomes quieter, stronger, harder to shake. You stop reacting instantly. You stop chasing validation. You stop allowing temporary emotions to dictate permanent decisions. You begin carrying yourself differently. People notice it, not because you speak louder, but because your presence becomes calmer, controlled, grounded. There is power in that kind of stillness, real power, the kind of power that cannot be faked because it was built internally, long before it was ever seen externally. And this is where the transformation begins, not with motivation, not with external success, but with the decision to reclaim ownership over your own mind before the world touches it. There are 5 Stoic lines that can help build that foundation every morning. Not empty affirmations, not soft positivity. These are mental commands. Principles designed to strengthen discipline, emotional control, resilience, and inner clarity. Repeat them daily, and over time they begin reshaping the way you think, the way you respond, and ultimately the kind of man you become. Because before the world speaks to you each morning, you must first decide who you are. Your mind is either a fortress or an open gate. There is no middle ground. Every single day, something is trying to enter your consciousness. Opinions, fear, negativity, temptation, anger, distraction, weakness. The modern world profits from a distracted mind because a distracted man is easier to control, easier to manipulate, easier to exhaust. Most people never realize this. They walk through life mentally unguarded, allowing every emotion, every headline, every insult, and every inconvenience to penetrate their inner world without resistance. And over time, they slowly lose themselves. Stoicism teaches that the greatest responsibility a man has is the governance of his own mind, not his image, not his status, not his possessions, his mind. Because once the mind becomes unstable, everything else follows. A restless mind creates a restless life. A reactive mind creates a chaotic life. A weak mind creates a weak identity. This is why the Stoics treated the mind like a fortress that had to be protected constantly, not occasionally, daily, intentionally, relentlessly. Imagine a fortress standing alone against a violent storm. The winds crash against its walls. The rain pounds against the stone. The world outside is chaos, but inside there is stillness, order, stability. That is what Stoicism aims to build inside a man. Not a life without problems, but a mind that remains unshaken by them. Most men today have the opposite. Their minds are overcrowded cities with no guards at the gates. Every negative thought is welcomed in. Every emotional impulse is obeyed immediately. Every criticism becomes a wound. Every inconvenience becomes a crisis. And because they lack inner discipline, They spend their lives emotionally reacting instead of consciously living. Marcus Aurelius warned himself constantly about this, even as Emperor of Rome. Surrounded by power, pressure, betrayal, and responsibility, he understood that external chaos meant nothing compared to internal disorder. He wrote to himself as a reminder that the mind must remain stronger than circumstances. Because once circumstances control your inner state, you are no longer free. Most people believe freedom means doing whatever they want. Stoicism teaches the opposite. Real freedom is mastering yourself so completely that external events no longer dictate your peace. That kind of freedom is rare, and it is built in silence long before it is visible externally. Every morning, the world attempts to shape your emotional state before you even realize it. You check your phone, and suddenly your mood belongs to the internet. You hear bad news, and immediately your thoughts spiral into anxiety. Someone disrespects you, and anger controls your behavior for hours. A plan fails, and your entire identity collapses emotionally. This is not strength, it is dependency. Stoicism demands independence from emotional chaos. It teaches that between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies your power. Weak men react instantly because they are slaves to emotion. Stoic men pause, observe, think, then choose deliberately. That pause changes everything. It is the difference between destruction and discipline, between regret and wisdom, between emotional weakness and masculine composure. This is why protecting your mind is one of the highest forms of self-respect. Not every opinion deserves entry into your consciousness. Not every insult deserves your anger. Not every distraction deserves your attention. A disciplined man becomes extremely selective about what he allows into his inner world because he understands something dangerous. Repeated thoughts eventually become identity. If you constantly feed your mind negativity, comparison, outrage, and distraction, eventually your character begins reflecting those things. Your mind becomes fragmented, exhausted, unstable. But when you deliberately guard your thoughts, something powerful begins happening internally. You become calmer, more focused, harder to manipulate. Emotional noise starts losing its influence over you. And for the first time in a long time, you begin hearing your own thoughts clearly again. Silence becomes less uncomfortable. Solitude becomes less frightening. Because you are no longer running from yourself. Most people cannot sit alone in silence for 10 minutes without needing stimulation. Music, scrolling, messages, noise, anything to avoid confronting their own minds. But Stoicism teaches that the quality of your life depends on the quality of your inner dialogue. And if your inner dialogue is filled with fear, anger, insecurity, and chaos, no external success will ever bring peace. This is why disciplined men protect their mornings so carefully. The first thoughts of the day matter. They shape your emotional direction before the world interferes. If your morning begins with reaction, your day becomes reaction. But if your morning begins with awareness, your day becomes intentional. Think about how many people wake up already defeated mentally. Before sunrise, they are already anxious about money, relationships, status, responsibilities, and problems they cannot even solve in that moment. Their minds are constantly consumed by things outside their control. Stoicism calls this unnecessary suffering, because suffering often begins not in reality, but in interpretation. Two men can experience the same hardship. One collapses emotionally, the other grows stronger from it. The event is the same. The mind is different. That difference changes destiny. This is why the Stoics believed the mind had to be trained daily like a weapon, not through empty positivity, through discipline, through awareness, through constant observation of thought itself. A man who cannot command his own attention will always belong to something else, to social media, to anger, to temptation, to fear, to approval, to distraction. But the moment you begin guarding your inner world carefully, Your entire presence changes. You stop leaking emotional energy everywhere. You stop reacting impulsively. You stop allowing small things to disturb your peace. People notice it immediately. Calmness is rare in a world addicted to reaction. And because it is rare, it becomes powerful. There is something intimidating about a man who remains composed under pressure, a man who does not panic easily, a man who does not explode emotionally every time life becomes uncomfortable. That kind of emotional control creates silent authority, not because he demands respect, but because his discipline naturally commands it. Stoicism is not about becoming emotionless. It is about becoming emotionally disciplined. There is a difference. The Stoic still feels anger, disappointment, fear, and pain, but he refuses to become owned by them. He experiences emotion without surrendering leadership of his mind. That is strength, real strength. And this is why the fortress matters, because every day the world will test your walls. Stress will test them, people will test them, failure will test them, loneliness will test them, temptation will test them. And if your inner world has not been strengthened beforehand, life will enter your mind like an invading army. But if your discipline is strong, if your thoughts are governed, if your principles are clear, then even in chaos, there will still be order within you. And that is where true power begins. The first Stoic line is not simply a phrase to repeat. It is a declaration of mental authority, a decision to stop living emotionally and start living deliberately. Because from this moment forward, your mind must become a fortress the world cannot easily penetrate. The first Stoic line is simple, but most people will spend their entire lives failing to live by it. Today, I control my reactions. Not my circumstances, not other people, not the outcome of every situation. My reactions. That is where power begins. Most men believe their suffering comes from the world around them. Stoicism teaches that most suffering comes from the inability to govern the mind when the world becomes difficult. A disrespectful comment ruins their mood for hours. One inconvenience destroys their discipline. One rejection shakes their confidence. One stressful situation turns them angry, emotional, and impulsive. They live as prisoners of reaction, constantly controlled by whatever happens around them. But the Stoic understands something dangerous. If another person can control your emotional state, then they control you. Real strength is not found in dominating others. It is found in mastering yourself. This is why emotional control was considered one of the highest forms of power in Stoicism, because a man who controls his reactions cannot easily be manipulated. Think about how modern society conditions people to react instantly. Social media trains outrage. News trains fear. Arguments train anger. Validation trains insecurity. Everything around you is designed to provoke emotional impulses, because emotional people are predictable people. They can be controlled through fear, pleasure, approval, and distraction. Stoicism breaks that conditioning completely. It teaches you to pause before reacting, to observe before speaking, to think before obeying emotion. And that pause changes the quality of your entire life. Most damage in life happens in moments of emotional blindness. A man says something in anger and destroys a relationship. He reacts impulsively and ruins an opportunity. He allows temporary emotion to create permanent consequences. Later, when the emotion fades, regret arrives. But Stoicism trains a different response. Instead of instantly obeying emotion, the Stoic creates space between feeling and action. In that space, wisdom appears. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Most people read that quote and move on, but very few actually understand it deeply. If you truly accept that your power exists in your response, then suddenly life changes completely. You stop trying to control everything externally. You stop exhausting yourself fighting reality. You stop demanding that life behave according to your expectations. Instead, you begin mastering the only territory that truly belongs to you, your own mind. Imagine two men facing the exact same situation. Both are insulted publicly. One explodes emotionally. He becomes angry, defensive, aggressive. His pride takes control of his behavior. The other remains calm. He listens. He evaluates. He chooses his response carefully. Which man appears stronger? The loud one may seem powerful for a moment, but deep down everyone recognizes the truth. Emotional instability is weakness disguised as intensity. Calmness under pressure is real strength. This is why Stoic men often appear emotionally untouchable. Not because they feel nothing, but because they refuse to surrender leadership of their minds to temporary emotions. They understand that anger is often more destructive to the person holding it than to the target receiving it. They understand that emotional impulsiveness clouds judgment, and they understand that reacting emotionally gives away inner authority. Every reaction trains your nervous system. Most people never realize this. Each time you explode in anger, panic under stress, or react impulsively, you strengthen those patterns. Over time, emotional chaos becomes automatic. But the reverse is also true. Each time you remain composed under pressure, you strengthen discipline. Each time you pause instead of reacting, you strengthen awareness. Each time you choose reason over impulse, you build internal power. Slowly, your character changes. This is why Stoicism is not philosophy for comfort. It is philosophy for training the mind. Because the world will constantly test your emotional discipline. Someone will disrespect you, someone will misunderstand you. Someone will betray you, plans will fail, life will become unfair. And in those moments, your reactions reveal who you truly are internally. Weak men need external peace to remain stable. Stoic men create internal stability regardless of external chaos. That is the difference. One depends on circumstances, the other depends on discipline. Most people spend their entire lives emotionally available to everything around them. A stranger's opinion ruins their confidence. Social media ruins their focus. Temporary emotions ruin long-term goals. They wake up motivated one day and defeated the next because their inner state constantly depends on external conditions. Stoicism destroys this dependency. It teaches emotional sovereignty, the ability to remain internally grounded even when the world becomes unstable. This does not mean becoming cold or emotionless. Stoicism has been misunderstood for centuries because people mistake emotional discipline for emotional suppression. The Stoic still experiences pain, still experiences disappointment, still experiences anger and grief, but he refuses to become consumed by them. He experiences emotion without becoming owned by it. That distinction changes everything, because emotions themselves are not the enemy. Uncontrolled emotions are. A man incapable of anger becomes passive, but a man enslaved by anger becomes dangerous to himself. Stoicism seeks balance, controlled fire, directed emotion, strength guided by wisdom instead of impulse. Think about the men you naturally respect most. Usually, they are not the loudest, not the most emotional, not the most reactive. They are calm under pressure, deliberate with words, difficult to provoke, stable during chaos. Their presence alone creates certainty because emotional discipline radiates outward. People trust calmness instinctively. Why? Because calmness signals control, and control signals strength. This is why silence becomes such a powerful weapon for the Stoic. Not every insult deserves a response. Not every provocation deserves your energy. Sometimes the strongest reaction is no reaction at all. That kind of restraint terrifies emotionally chaotic people because they cannot understand it. They expect emotional access to your mind. And when they cannot control your reactions, they lose power over you. Epictetus taught that if someone succeeds in provoking you emotionally, they become your master. Modern life proves this constantly. Entire industries profit from keeping people emotionally reactive. Outrage generates clicks. Fear generates attention. Insecurity generates consumption. Emotional instability generates dependency. A calm, disciplined man is difficult to manipulate because he sees clearly. He is not dragged emotionally by every wave of external noise. He remains centered, grounded, intentional. This is why the first Stoic line must become more than words. It must become identity. Today, I control my reactions. Not sometimes. Not only when life feels easy, especially when life becomes difficult, especially when emotions rise, especially when pressure appears. Because anyone can appear calm when nothing challenges them. But true discipline is revealed under pressure. That is where character is forged. Every morning, when you repeat this line, you are reminding yourself that emotional leadership belongs to you, not your anger, not your fear, not other people. You are reclaiming authority over your own inner state before the world attempts to take it from you. And slowly, through repetition, something powerful begins happening. Your mind becomes less chaotic, your emotions become less impulsive, your presence becomes calmer, stronger, more grounded. People notice you differently. Situations affect you differently. Problems stop feeling like emotional emergencies. And eventually you realize the truth Stoicism was trying to teach all along. The man who controls his reactions controls his life. The second Stoic line is this: I focus only on what matters. Simple words. But in a world designed to destroy attention, this mindset becomes a form of rebellion. Most people never lose their lives dramatically. They lose them gradually, one distraction at a time, one meaningless argument at a time, 1 hour wasted scrolling at a time, one emotional obsession at a time. Attention is the most valuable currency you possess because wherever your attention goes, your life follows. And modern society knows this. Entire systems are built to capture your focus before you even realize it is happening. Notifications interrupt your peace. Endless content fractures your concentration. Comparison poisons your self-worth. And slowly, without noticing, your mind becomes scattered in 1,000 directions. This is why so many people feel mentally exhausted, despite accomplishing very little. Their energy leaks into everything except what truly matters. Stoicism teaches that discipline is not only about controlling behavior, it is about controlling attention, because the quality of your focus determines the quality of your life. A distracted man cannot build strength, cannot build purpose, cannot build peace. His mind is constantly pulled outward, reacting to whatever appears in front of him next. He becomes mentally fragmented, present nowhere, controlled by everything. Epictetus understood this deeply. He taught that external things only gain power over us when we assign importance to them. That means much of modern suffering comes not from reality itself, but from misplaced attention. People spend years emotionally invested in things that add nothing to their growth. Opinions of strangers, temporary trends, social validation, petty conflict, endless comparison. They feed their minds garbage every day and wonder why they feel empty internally. The Stoic chooses differently. He becomes ruthless with focus, not cold, not disconnected, focused. He asks himself constantly, does this deserve my energy? Does this help me grow stronger? Does this align with the man I want to become? Most things fail that test. Most distractions are not important enough to deserve your mind. But modern culture trains people to treat everything like an emergency. Every notification feels urgent. Every opinion feels personal. Every inconvenience feels significant. And because of this, people lose the ability to think deeply. Their minds are trapped in constant stimulation. Silence becomes uncomfortable because silence forces confrontation with the self. This is why disciplined men often separate themselves from noise. They understand that clarity requires distance from chaos. The modern world glorifies busyness, but Stoicism values intentionality. There is a difference. Being busy does not mean being effective. Many people spend entire days active yet move nowhere meaningful internally. They are constantly occupied but spiritually directionless. Stoicism cuts through that confusion with brutal simplicity. Focus on what matters, ignore what does not. That principle alone can transform a life. Imagine how much mental energy people waste daily on things outside their control. Worrying about what others think, replaying old mistakes repeatedly, obsessing over situations they cannot change, comparing their lives constantly to curated illusions online. This constant mental noise drains strength, it weakens discipline, it destroys inner peace. But the Stoic understands that attention is sacred. Whatever you repeatedly focus on shapes your character. Focus on fear, and fear grows stronger. Focus on distraction, and discipline weakens. Focus on negativity, and bitterness begins poisoning perception. But focus on purpose, growth, discipline, and truth, and gradually the mind transforms. Most men today do not lack intelligence. They lack concentrated direction. Their minds are divided between too many impulses. One moment they seek discipline, the next moment they seek comfort. One moment they want growth, the next moment they chase distraction. Their attention constantly shifts depending on emotion, and without stable focus, no meaningful transformation can occur. Stoicism demands consistency of mind, the ability to hold attention on what truly matters despite discomfort, boredom, temptation, or external noise. This is rare, very rare, because focus requires sacrifice. To focus deeply on one thing means deliberately ignoring many others. And most people fear missing out more than they fear wasting their lives. But the Stoic knows something most people refuse to accept. Every yes to distraction is a no to your potential. Every hour consumed by meaningless noise is an hour stolen from your future self. This is why strong men protect their attention aggressively. They understand that focus creates power. A distracted man becomes weak not physically but mentally. He loses clarity, loses direction, loses control over his own inner world. But a focused man develops something dangerous: momentum. Once attention becomes disciplined, actions become disciplined. And once actions become disciplined, identity begins changing automatically. This is why Stoicism places such importance on intentional living, not drifting through life unconsciously. Choosing consciously where your energy goes, choosing consciously which thoughts deserve attention, choosing consciously what kind of life you are building every single day. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself how little time truly exists, not as pessimism, but as clarity. Life is short. Attention is limited, energy is limited, and if you waste those resources carelessly, eventually regret arrives. Many people reach the end of their lives realizing they spent more time reacting than truly living, more time distracted than present, more time chasing validation than building character. Stoicism refuses that fate. It teaches that meaning is built through deliberate focus on virtue, growth, and purpose, not through endless stimulation. Think about the strongest people you know mentally. Usually, they are focused individuals, calm individuals. They are not emotionally pulled in every direction constantly. Their attention has structure. Their priorities are clear. They know what matters and what does not. That clarity creates stability, and stability creates strength. This is why the second Stoic line matters so deeply. I focus only on what matters. Not what is loudest, not what is trending, not what temporarily stimulates emotion. What matters? Growth matters. Discipline matters. Peace matters. Character matters. Purpose matters. Everything else is noise. And the moment you truly understand this, your life begins simplifying in a powerful way. You stop arguing unnecessarily, stop seeking approval constantly, stop wasting energy proving yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, stop feeding distractions that weaken your mind. Instead, you begin protecting your focus like a weapon, because it is. A focused mind becomes difficult to break, difficult to manipulate, difficult to control externally. There is tremendous power in a man who knows exactly where his attention belongs. While others scatter their energy everywhere, he moves with direction, intention, precision. He no longer chases everything because he finally understands what truly deserves pursuit. And in a world addicted to distraction, that level of focus becomes a form of silent superiority. The third Stoic line is this: I choose courage over comfort. And in the modern world, this may be one of the rarest decisions a man can make, because modern life is designed around comfort. Comfort is sold as happiness. Ease is sold as success. Convenience is sold as freedom. Everywhere you look, society encourages escape from difficulty, escape from silence, escape from discomfort, escape from struggle. But Stoicism teaches the exact opposite. It teaches that comfort, when worshipped too deeply, weakens the mind, weakens discipline, weakens character, and eventually weakens the man himself. Most people do not realize how much of their suffering comes from avoiding discomfort. They avoid difficult conversations, so resentment grows silently. They avoid discipline, so regret replaces confidence. They avoid solitude, so they become dependent on constant distraction. They avoid pain, so they never discover their true strength. Stoicism does not glorify suffering for the sake of suffering. It teaches that voluntary discomfort builds inner freedom, because the man who can endure discomfort calmly becomes difficult to control. Think about how fragile modern minds have become. Small inconveniences create emotional collapse. Delayed gratification feels unbearable. Silence feels uncomfortable. Rejection feels catastrophic. Why? Because most people have trained themselves to seek comfort at every possible moment. And comfort is addictive. The more you obey it, the weaker your tolerance for adversity becomes. Eventually, even ordinary challenges begin feeling overwhelming. This is why so many men feel mentally exhausted by life itself. Not because they are incapable, but because they have lost resilience. Stoicism rebuilds that resilience by teaching a man to stop running from discomfort and start facing it deliberately. Seneca practiced voluntary hardship for this exact reason. Despite wealth and status, he would sometimes sleep on hard surfaces, wear simple clothing, and deny himself luxury, not to punish himself, to train himself. He wanted to prove that his peace did not depend on comfort. He understood something most people never learn. The less dependent you are on comfort, the more powerful you become internally. Because dependency creates fear, fear of loss, fear of struggle, fear of uncertainty. But when a man becomes comfortable with discomfort itself, fear loses its grip on him. Most people spend their lives unconsciously asking, what feels easiest right now? The Stoic asks a different question entirely. What builds strength? Those two paths lead to completely different destinies. One creates temporary pleasure but long-term weakness. The other creates temporary struggle but long-term power. And life eventually reveals the difference between the two. Comfort always promises relief in the moment. Stay in bed longer. Avoid the hard conversation. Delay the work. Escape into entertainment. Ignore the problem. react emotionally instead of thinking clearly. All of it feels easier temporarily, but every act of avoidance quietly trains weakness. Each time you surrender to comfort over growth, you reinforce the version of yourself that wants ease more than transformation. And eventually, that version becomes your identity. Stoicism interrupts this pattern completely. It reminds you that growth almost always feels uncomfortable in the beginning. Discipline feels uncomfortable. Honesty feels uncomfortable. Self-control feels uncomfortable. Solitude feels uncomfortable. Facing your flaws feels uncomfortable. But discomfort is often the doorway to strength. Most men never walk through that doorway because they mistake comfort for peace. They are not the same thing. Comfort is external. Peace is internal. Comfort disappears the moment circumstances change. But inner peace remains stable because it was built through discipline rather than dependency. This is why Stoic men often appear calm during adversity. Their strength was not built during easy moments. It was built during difficult ones. Every hardship became training. Every setback became resistance. Every uncomfortable moment became an opportunity to strengthen the mind instead of escaping reality. Think about the strongest version of yourself you could become. That version does not emerge from endless comfort. It emerges from challenge, from restraint, from sacrifice, from choosing discipline when comfort feels easier. No man becomes mentally unbreakable through convenience. Strength is forged through resistance, just like iron is forged through fire. This is why suffering, when approached correctly, can become transformational instead of destructive. The Stoic does not ask life to remove difficulty. He asks himself to become stronger. That shift changes everything, because once you stop seeing discomfort as the enemy, you stop fearing growth itself. Modern culture tells people to follow feelings constantly. Stoicism warns against this. Feelings change every hour. Discipline remains. If you only act when motivation appears, your life becomes emotionally inconsistent. Some days productive, some days weak, some days focused, some days distracted. But the Stoic builds systems stronger than emotion. He acts according to principle, not temporary mood. This is why courage matters so deeply. Courage is not only battlefield bravery. Stoicism defines courage much more broadly. Courage is telling the truth when lying would feel safer. Courage is remaining disciplined when everyone else chooses comfort. Courage is staying calm during chaos. Courage is standing alone in your values when the world pressures compromise. Courage is facing yourself honestly. And perhaps most importantly, courage is enduring discomfort without losing dignity. Most people think strength means aggression, but often strength is quiet endurance, the ability to continue moving forward without emotional collapse, the ability to remain stable through uncertainty, the ability to carry pain without allowing pain to poison your character. That kind of strength is rare because it cannot be faked. It is earned privately through repeated acts of discipline nobody sees. Every morning, you face a choice between comfort and growth. Stay asleep mentally or become sharper. Stay distracted or become focused. Stay emotionally reactive or become disciplined. Stay weak or become stronger. These choices seem small daily, but over years they completely shape identity. Weakness is not built overnight, neither is strength. Both are trained repeatedly through habits. This is why Stoicism places such importance on daily practice. Character is not created during dramatic moments alone. It is built quietly through repeated decisions, one disciplined action at a time, one uncomfortable choice at a time, one moment of restraint at a time. Eventually, those moments compound into identity, and slowly, a different kind of man emerges, calmer, stronger, more resilient, less dependent on external comfort for internal stability, People notice this transformation instinctively. There is something powerful about a man who no longer panics when life becomes difficult, a man who does not crumble emotionally under pressure, a man who can endure discomfort without becoming bitter. That kind of resilience creates natural respect because it signals depth, emotional maturity, inner stability. The Stoics understood that life would inevitably contain pain, loss, rejection, failure, aging, uncertainty. No philosophy can remove those realities. But Stoicism teaches that suffering becomes far more dangerous when combined with fear and avoidance. Courage removes that fear. It allows a man to face reality directly instead of hiding from it. And once you stop running from discomfort, something incredible happens. Life itself becomes less frightening because you realize that most of your limits were mental. Most of your fears were exaggerated. Most of your suffering came not from difficulty itself, but from resistance to difficulty. This is why the third Stoic line matters so deeply. I choose courage over comfort, not because suffering is noble, but because comfort alone never builds the man you are capable of becoming. Courage does, discipline does, voluntary struggle does, and every time you choose growth instead of ease, you strengthen the part of yourself the world can never easily break. There is a kind of strength that only silence can build. Not noise, not attention, not constant stimulation, silence. The modern world fears silence because silence forces confrontation. The moment everything becomes quiet, people are left alone with their own thoughts, their fears, their insecurities, their unresolved emotions, and most people will do anything to escape that encounter. They reach for music immediately, scroll endlessly, fill every empty second with distraction, not because they are entertained, but because they are uncomfortable with themselves. Stoicism teaches something radically different. It teaches that solitude is not punishment. Solitude is training. It is where a man meets himself without performance, without validation, without noise, and that meeting changes everything. The strongest men in history understood the power of retreat, not retreat from life, but retreat from distraction. Marcus Aurelius would withdraw inward even while surrounded by the chaos of empire. He understood that a man who cannot sit quietly with his own mind will always depend on external stimulation for peace, and dependency is weakness. This is why silence becomes sacred for the Stoic. In silence, illusions begin collapsing. You start seeing yourself clearly, the distractions disappear, and what remains is truth. That truth is not always comfortable. Silence reveals how undisciplined the mind really is. It reveals how addicted modern people have become to stimulation. Most people cannot sit still for 10 minutes without needing escape. Their minds immediately begin searching for entertainment, validation, or noise because stillness feels unfamiliar. But the Stoic trains himself to remain there calmly, to observe without reacting, to think without panic, to breathe without needing distraction. That ability creates inner power most people never experience. Early mornings carry a certain kind of energy the world has forgotten. Before the noise begins, before the messages arrive, before responsibilities start pulling attention in every direction, there is a brief moment where the world is still, cold air, quiet streets, dim light entering the room slowly. In those moments, something becomes possible, clarity. The Stoic understands this deeply. This is why disciplined men protect the early hours so carefully, because morning solitude sharpens awareness before chaos enters the mind. Most people wake up and immediately allow the world into their consciousness. They check notifications before checking themselves internally. They absorb everyone else's thoughts before examining their own. And because of this, they spend their days mentally scattered. Stoicism reverses that process completely. It teaches that before speaking to the world, you must first Establish order within yourself. A man who begins his morning in silence develops a different kind of presence. He becomes less reactive, less emotionally desperate, less dependent on external approval. Why? Because silence strengthens self-awareness, and self-awareness strengthens control. Most emotional weakness comes from unconscious living. People react impulsively because they never pause long enough to observe what is happening inside them. Anger appears and immediately controls behavior. Fear appears and immediately controls decisions. Anxiety appears and immediately shapes perception. But in silence, the Stoic learns observation. He learns to watch thoughts without obeying them automatically. That skill changes everything. Because once you can observe emotion calmly, you stop becoming owned by it. This is why solitude becomes such powerful training for emotional discipline. Alone, there is nobody to impress. Nobody to distract you from yourself, just your own mind. And for many people, that is terrifying. But the Stoic walks directly into that discomfort because he knows something important. If you cannot face yourself honestly in silence, you will spend your entire life escaping internally. Modern society constantly pushes people outward. More content, more stimulation, more entertainment, more comparison, but very little introspection, very little stillness. And without stillness, people lose connection with themselves completely. They become reactive creatures driven by external influence rather than internal principle. Stoicism restores inner connection through deliberate solitude. In silence, priorities become clearer. Noise loses importance. Ego begins softening. You start recognizing how much mental energy was wasted on things that never truly mattered. Arguments, validation, status, endless comparison. Silence strips away illusion and reveals what remains underneath. Character, discipline, thought, truth. This is why many people avoid solitude entirely. Because silence exposes weakness before strength can be built. It reveals emotional dependency. It reveals insecurity. It reveals how much of identity was constructed around distraction. But if a man stays long enough in that silence without running away, transformation begins slowly. He becomes more grounded internally, more aware of his own patterns, more capable of controlling his attention and emotions. Solitude also teaches independence from external validation. In silence, nobody applauds you. Nobody notices your discipline. Nobody rewards your restraint. And that is precisely why it matters. The Stoic learns to value internal integrity over external recognition. He no longer needs constant approval to feel stable. His peace stops depending on how others perceive him. That freedom is powerful because once a man becomes emotionally independent from validation, he becomes difficult to manipulate socially. He stops performing constantly for acceptance. He stops shaping his identity around trends or approval. He becomes anchored internally instead of externally. This creates a calmness people immediately notice, but often cannot explain. There is something different about a man who spends time in silence intentionally. He speaks slower, reacts less impulsively, carries himself with more presence. His energy feels grounded because his mind is no longer overstimulated constantly. Most people today operate from mental exhaustion, endless information, endless emotional input, endless noise. Their nervous systems never truly rest. And because of this, they lose access to clarity. Stoicism restores clarity through stillness. It teaches that wisdom grows in silence, not noise. This is why the Stoic morning ritual matters so deeply. Before entering the world, the disciplined man enters himself first. He sits quietly, reflects, observes, reclaims his center before life, begins testing it. While others wake up mentally scattered, he builds stability. While others drown in distraction, he builds awareness. While others search externally for peace, he cultivates it internally, and over time that daily practice transforms his entire presence. People often mistake silence for weakness because modern culture glorifies loudness, constant talking, constant posting, constant reacting. But Stoicism understands that true strength rarely needs to announce itself. Calmness carries its own authority. Stillness carries its own power. A disciplined man does not need to prove himself constantly because his confidence is built internally rather than socially. That kind of confidence cannot be easily shaken because it was not built on attention. It was built in solitude. This is why silence becomes more than a habit for the Stoic. It becomes protection, a place where the mind sharpens itself away from distraction, a place where emotions settle instead of exploding outward, a place where identity becomes stronger than noise. And eventually, after enough mornings spent in stillness, something changes deeply within a man. He stops fearing silence. He begins needing it. Because for the first time in his life, silence no longer feels empty. It feels powerful. The fourth Stoic line is this: I am grateful even for the struggle. Most people misunderstand gratitude completely. They think gratitude means appreciating life only when things are easy, only when circumstances are pleasant, only when success arrives. But Stoicism teaches a far deeper form of gratitude, a gratitude rooted not in comfort, but in acceptance. The Stoic does not merely appreciate pleasure, he learns to appreciate the process that shapes him, including pain, including hardship, including suffering, because he understands something most people spend their lives resisting. Struggle is often the thing that reveals who you truly are. Easy lives rarely build strong men. Comfort rarely creates wisdom. Difficulty does. The moments people want to escape most are often the moments that forge depth, resilience, patience, and clarity. Yet modern culture teaches the opposite. It teaches people to resent discomfort immediately, to view suffering as proof that life is unfair, to become bitter whenever reality becomes painful. But Stoicism transforms suffering into training. It asks a different question, not why is this happening to me, but what is this teaching me? That shift changes everything, because once suffering gains meaning, it becomes easier to endure with dignity. Think about how many people become emotionally destroyed by hardship because they never learn how to carry pain correctly. Betrayal turns into hatred, failure turns into insecurity, loneliness turns into desperation, difficulty turns into bitterness. Instead of allowing pain to refine them, they allow pain to poison them. Stoicism refuses this path. It teaches that pain itself is not the enemy. Unconscious suffering is. A man who suffers without reflection becomes broken, but a man who suffers with awareness becomes stronger. This is why the Stoics practiced acceptance so deeply. Not passive surrender, conscious acceptance of reality as it is. Marcus Aurelius understood this principle intimately. Surrounded by war, political betrayal, disease, pressure, and uncertainty, he repeatedly reminded himself that obstacles were part of life itself, not interruptions to life, part of it. This mindset is what the Stoics called amor fati, the love of fate, not merely tolerating reality, but embracing it fully, even the painful parts, especially the painful parts, because every hardship contains the possibility of transformation. Most people spend enormous energy fighting reality emotionally. They replay the past endlessly. They resent what happened. They wish life had unfolded differently. And because of this resistance, they remain trapped psychologically in events they cannot change. Stoicism breaks those chains. It teaches that peace begins the moment you stop demanding that the past become different. The past is gone. The struggle happened. The pain happened. The loss happened. Now, the only question is whether you will let it destroy you or refine you. There is a quiet strength in the man who can say, "This hurt me, but it also built me." That is not weakness. That is emotional maturity. Most people either deny pain or become consumed by it. The Stoic does neither. He faces it directly, he studies it, learns from it, carries it with dignity, because he understands that suffering handled correctly creates depth that comfort never could. Think about betrayal. Betrayal reveals attachment, reveals misplaced trust, reveals emotional dependency. It hurts deeply because it exposes vulnerability, but it also teaches discernment, boundaries, awareness. The Stoic does not become bitter after betrayal. He becomes wiser. Think about loneliness. Most people fear solitude because they fear themselves, but loneliness often forces a man to develop internal stability instead of relying constantly on external validation. Some of the strongest transformations happen in isolation because isolation strips away distraction and forces reflection. The Stoic understands this. He stops viewing lonely seasons as punishment and begins viewing them as preparation. Think about failure. Modern culture treats failure like humiliation. Stoicism treats failure like instruction. Failure exposes weakness honestly. It reveals where discipline is missing, where ego interfered, where preparation failed. Painful, yes, but valuable, because a man willing to learn from failure becomes difficult to defeat permanently. Every setback sharpens him further. This is why gratitude matters so deeply in Stoicism. Gratitude keeps the mind from collapsing into victimhood. It prevents suffering from becoming identity. Instead of saying, "Life is against me," the Stoic begins saying, "Life is shaping me." That shift creates resilience. Most people only appreciate lessons after years have passed. They look back and realize the breakup forced growth, the hardship forced discipline, the loneliness forced self-discovery, the struggle forced maturity. Stoicism simply accelerates this awareness. It teaches you to recognize value within the difficulty itself instead of waiting years to understand it. This does not mean pretending pain feels good. Stoicism is not emotional denial. Grief still hurts. Loss still hurts. Rejection still hurts. The Stoic feels pain fully, but he refuses to let pain become meaningless suffering. There is purpose hidden inside hardship if a man has the courage to look for it. And often, the moments that nearly break a man become the moments that awaken him. Many people become softer after suffering. The Stoic becomes deeper, more compassionate, more disciplined, more grounded, because suffering stripped away illusions. It revealed what truly matters. This is why gratitude becomes such powerful emotional armor. A grateful man cannot be easily consumed by bitterness. Gratitude shifts focus from entitlement to awareness, from resentment to growth, from emotional resistance to inner strength. The Stoic becomes grateful not because life is easy, but because every experience contains the opportunity to sharpen character, even suffering, especially suffering. There is something profoundly powerful about a man who remains grateful during hardship. Not fake positivity, real grounded gratitude. The understanding that struggle itself can become sacred because it transforms weakness into wisdom. Most people pray for easier lives. The Stoic prays for greater strength. That difference changes destiny, because life will never become permanently comfortable. Difficulty will always return in different forms. Loss, aging, uncertainty, failure, pain, none of these can be escaped forever. But Stoicism teaches that a disciplined mind can face all of them without surrendering inner peace. This is why the fourth line matters so deeply. I am grateful even for the struggle, because the struggle is often where the real transformation begins. It is where ego dies, where resilience grows, where discipline is tested, where identity is forged. And one day, after enough pain has refined you, instead of destroying you, you realize something extraordinary. The things that once felt like they were ruining your life were actually rebuilding you. The fifth Stoic line is this: every experience teaches me. This is where true transformation begins, because most people move through life unconsciously. They repeat the same mistakes, the same emotional patterns, the same destructive habits again and again, not because life refuses to teach them, but because they refuse to learn. Stoicism teaches that wisdom is not found only in books or philosophy. Wisdom is hidden inside experience itself. Every failure, every rejection, every humiliation, every disappointment, every difficult season carries a lesson powerful enough to change a man if he is willing to see it clearly instead of reacting emotionally to it. Most people only ask one question when hardship appears: how do I escape this? The Stoic asks a far more powerful question: what is this trying to teach me? That question transforms suffering into education. Suddenly, failure is no longer meaningless pain. It becomes instruction. Rejection becomes clarity. Difficulty becomes training. And life itself becomes a teacher instead of an enemy. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. He wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Most people hear those words and admire them intellectually, but very few live them, because living them requires emotional maturity. It requires refusing to collapse every time reality becomes difficult. The Stoic understands that obstacles are not interruptions to growth. Obstacles are growth. Every challenge reveals something: weakness, ego, fear, attachment, impatience, insecurity. And although these revelations can be painful, they are also valuable because awareness is the beginning of transformation. A man cannot improve what he refuses to see. This is why failure becomes such an important teacher in Stoicism. Failure strips away illusion brutally. Success often feeds ego. Failure exposes truth. It reveals where discipline was missing, where preparation was lacking, where emotional weakness interfered with judgment. Most people experience failure and immediately become defensive. They blame circumstances, blame people, blame bad luck, anything to protect the ego from discomfort. But the Stoic uses failure differently. He studies it calmly. He extracts wisdom from it, because every painful experience contains information capable of strengthening character. The modern world encourages emotional avoidance constantly. People numb themselves instead of reflecting, distract themselves instead of learning. They rush from one stimulation to the next because stillness would force them to confront patterns they do not want to face. But Stoicism demands reflection, honest reflection. It teaches that if you do not learn consciously from experience, life will repeat the lesson until you finally do. Think about how many people keep repeating the same emotional cycles for years, same toxic relationships, same impulsive decisions, same self-destructive habits, same inability to control reactions. Why? Because pain alone does not create wisdom. Reflection does. Experience becomes valuable only when examined honestly. This is why the Stoics valued journaling and self-observation so deeply. They understood that the unexamined mind remains trapped in unconscious repetition. But the reflective mind evolves continuously. Every experience becomes material for growth, even embarrassment, even regret, even loss. There is tremendous power in a man who can admit, "I was wrong," without collapsing emotionally. That level of self-awareness is rare because ego resists truth aggressively. Most people would rather protect pride than pursue growth. But Stoicism teaches that pride often blocks wisdom. A wise man remains teachable regardless of status, age, or experience. He understands that life will always reveal new lessons. This mindset creates humility, not weakness, but grounded humility. The understanding that growth never truly ends, that every interaction contains insight if observed carefully enough. The Stoic becomes a student of life itself. He studies human behavior, studies his own emotions, studies mistakes, studies suffering, studies success. Nothing is wasted because everything becomes material for a deeper understanding. This is why difficult people can become valuable teachers too. A disrespectful person teaches patience. A manipulative person teaches discernment. A dishonest person teaches the value of integrity. A betrayal teaches boundaries. A failure teaches preparation. A lonely season teaches self-reliance. The Stoic stops dividing life into good experiences and bad experiences. Instead, he begins viewing all experiences as opportunities for refinement. Some lessons arrive gently, others arrive painfully, but all of them carry potential wisdom. Most people become bitter through suffering because they focus only on what was lost. The Stoic becomes wiser because he focuses on what can be learned. That difference changes everything. Bitterness traps a man in the past. Wisdom prepares him for the future. This is why emotionally mature people often become calmer after hardship instead of more reactive. They learned something. They grew. They stopped expecting life to be easy and started learning how to navigate it skillfully. Modern society often mistakes wisdom for intelligence, but they are not the same thing. Intelligence gathers information. Wisdom understands human nature. Wisdom understands consequence. Wisdom understands timing, restraint, discipline, and emotional control. And wisdom is almost always earned through experience rather than comfort. This is why suffering, when approached correctly, can deepen a person profoundly. Not because pain is magical, but because pain forces awareness. It strips away illusion. It reveals what truly matters. It humbles ego. It exposes weakness honestly. And if a man reflects instead of resisting, he emerges wiser afterward. The Stoic understands this process intimately. He stops asking life for constant comfort because he recognizes that challenge often accelerates growth. Some of the strongest people become strong precisely because life forced them to evolve, not despite the struggle, because of it. There is also freedom in this mindset. Once you begin viewing experiences as lessons instead of punishments, fear decreases. Failure becomes less terrifying. Rejection becomes less personal. Pain becomes more bearable, because even difficult experiences now contain value. Nothing is meaningless anymore. Every season contributes something to your development. Every obstacle sharpens awareness. Every hardship deepens understanding. This is why the fifth Stoic line matters so deeply. Every experience teaches me, because the moment you truly believe that, life changes completely. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstance. You become a student of reality instead. And students continue growing while victims remain emotionally trapped. Over time, this mindset creates extraordinary resilience. Problems stop feeling like proof that life is against you. They become opportunities to strengthen perception, discipline, and character. You begin responding differently, calmer, smarter, more intentionally, because wisdom slowly replaces emotional impulsiveness. And eventually, after enough reflection, enough hardship, enough lessons honestly faced, something remarkable happens. You become difficult to break, not because life stopped hurting you, but because every painful experience taught you how to become stronger than before. If you repeat these principles long enough, something begins changing inside you quietly. Not overnight, not dramatically. Stoic transformation rarely looks explosive from the outside. It happens slowly, silently, like stone being shaped by years of pressure, one morning at a time, one disciplined decision at a time, one controlled reaction at a time, and eventually, without realizing it immediately, you become different, calmer, sharper, harder to shake. The world still tests you, but it no longer controls you the same way. Situations that once triggered emotional chaos now meet a steadier mind. You stop reacting instantly, stop chasing validation, stop allowing every inconvenience to disturb your peace. And people notice it before you do. There is something unmistakable about a man who has learned how to govern himself internally. His presence changes, not because he tries to appear powerful, but because inner discipline naturally expresses itself outwardly. He speaks differently, moves differently, handles pressure differently. While others panic emotionally, he remains composed. While others seek attention desperately, he becomes quieter, more intentional, more grounded, and in a world addicted to emotional instability, that calmness feels rare, almost intimidating. Most people spend their entire lives emotionally exposed. Their mood depends on other people's behavior. Their confidence depends on approval. Their peace depends on circumstances remaining comfortable. But the Stoic slowly breaks those chains. He stops outsourcing his inner state to the external world. This is where real freedom begins. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, the freedom to remain internally stable regardless of what life does around you. That freedom changes a man deeply. He no longer fears rejection the same way because his identity is not built entirely on acceptance. He no longer fears solitude because he has learned how to sit peacefully with himself. He no longer fears discomfort because he understands discomfort builds strength. And because fear begins losing control over him, his presence naturally becomes more solid, more grounded, more masculine in the deepest sense of the word. Most people misunderstand masculinity completely. They think it is aggression, dominance, loudness, but Stoicism teaches a much deeper form of masculine strength. The ability to remain disciplined under pressure, the ability to carry responsibility without emotional collapse, the ability to protect peace internally while chaos exists externally. That kind of strength cannot be performed. It must be built privately through years of self-governance. This is why Stoic transformation often happens invisibly. Nobody sees the mornings spent in silence. Nobody sees the emotional restraint. Nobody sees the moments where you chose discipline instead of impulse. Nobody sees the internal battles fought quietly every single day. But eventually, the results become visible anyway. Because internal order always shapes external presence. A disciplined mind creates a disciplined life. The man you are becoming no longer needs to prove himself constantly. That desperation fades slowly. Why? Because true confidence begins replacing performance. Most insecurity comes from unstable identity. People constantly seek external confirmation because they do not trust themselves internally. But Stoicism rebuilds identity from the inside out. Every time you control your reactions, your self-respect increases. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, confidence deepens. Every time you remain focused despite distraction, internal trust strengthens. Over time, you stop needing the world to constantly reassure you of your worth because your character becomes your evidence. This creates emotional independence, one of the rarest forms of strength in modern society. Most people are emotionally dependent without realizing it, dependent on praise, dependent on attention, dependent on being understood, dependent on avoiding discomfort. But the Stoic slowly detaches from these dependencies, not because he becomes cold, but because he becomes internally sufficient. He learns how to stand alone mentally if necessary. And that ability changes the way he moves through life. There is a certain stillness that develops inside disciplined men, a calm confidence that does not need constant expression. They stop talking about becoming stronger because they are already building strength quietly every day. They stop reacting to every opinion because they no longer need universal approval. They stop chasing every distraction because purpose gives direction to attention. This is why Stoic men often appear mysterious to emotionally reactive people. Their stability feels unfamiliar. Their restraint feels unusual. Their calmness during adversity feels unnatural in a culture built on emotional impulsiveness. But this calmness is not accidental. It is trained. Built through repeated moments of awareness and discipline. Most people wait for life to force change upon them. The Stoic chooses change deliberately before suffering demands it. He trains emotional control before chaos arrives. He strengthens discipline before temptation appears. He builds internal order before life becomes unstable. This preparation creates resilience long before it becomes necessary. And when difficult seasons inevitably arrive, he does not collapse as easily because the foundation was already built. Think about how many people become destroyed by adversity simply because they never developed internal strength beforehand. The moment life becomes painful, they panic. The moment uncertainty appears, they lose direction. The moment discomfort arrives, they seek escape. But the Stoic has already practiced enduring difficulty mentally. He has already confronted discomfort voluntarily. He has already learned how to remain grounded during emotional storms. This is why his transformation becomes so powerful over time. He stops being ruled by circumstance. Instead, he develops the ability to carry stability into unstable situations. That ability creates quiet authority. And quiet authority is far more powerful than loud insecurity pretending to be strength. You begin noticing smaller changes too. Your thoughts become less chaotic. Your decisions become less impulsive. Your attention becomes more intentional. Even your relationships change because emotional maturity changes what you tolerate, what you pursue, and how you communicate. You stop seeking people who feed chaos. You begin valuing honesty, depth, discipline, and peace because internal growth naturally changes external standards. Eventually, even your suffering changes. Pain no longer automatically destroys you emotionally. Instead, you begin meeting hardship with greater awareness, greater patience, greater resilience. Not because life became easier, but because you became stronger. This is the real transformation Stoicism offers. Not perfection, not immunity from pain, mastery over yourself. And self-mastery changes everything. Because once a man can govern his own mind, very little in the external world can truly control him anymore. This is why these 5 Stoic lines matter so deeply. They are not merely affirmations. They are identity training, daily reminders of the kind of man you are choosing to become. A man who controls his reactions, a man who focuses only on what matters, a man who chooses courage over comfort, a man who remains grateful even through struggle, a man who learns from every experience. Repeat those principles long enough and eventually they stop being words. They become character, and character over time becomes destiny. Every morning, before the world speaks to you, there is a moment of silence, a brief moment where your mind has not yet been invaded by noise, pressure, distraction, or expectation. Most people waste that moment without realizing how powerful it truly is. They wake up unconsciously, immediately reactive, immediately consumed by the outside world. Their mind becomes crowded before their feet even touch the ground. And because they lose control of themselves early, they spend the rest of the day trying to recover internally. But the Stoic understands something different. He understands that mornings are not just beginnings, they are psychological battlefields. The way you begin the day shapes the way you experience life itself. If your morning begins with chaos, your thoughts become chaotic. If your morning begins with distraction, your attention becomes fragmented. If your morning begins with emotional reactivity, your peace becomes fragile. But if your morning begins with discipline, awareness, and intention, something extraordinary happens internally. You stop drifting through life unconsciously. You begin leading yourself deliberately. That is the real purpose of these 5 Stoic lines. Not empty motivation, not temporary inspiration, transformation. They're reminders of the man you are choosing to become every single day. A man who no longer gives his emotional state away carelessly. A man who understands that inner peace must be protected intentionally. A man who refuses to let comfort weaken him. A man who learns from suffering instead of becoming destroyed by it. A man who remains grounded while the world loses itself in chaos. This transformation will not happen instantly. Stoicism is not a quick fix. It is daily mental training, quiet repetition, consistent self-governance. Most people underestimate the power of repetition completely. They think change only happens during dramatic moments. But character is rarely shaped dramatically. It is shaped through daily rituals repeated consistently over time. One controlled reaction today, one disciplined decision tomorrow, one moment of silence the next morning. Slowly, almost invisibly, your identity begins shifting. And eventually, one day you notice something strange. Situations that once controlled you emotionally no longer have the same power. Chaos no longer enters your mind so easily. Disrespect no longer destroys your peace instantly. Solitude no longer feels empty. Difficulty no longer feels unbearable. You are still human. You still feel emotion. But now there is space between emotion and action, awareness between impulse and reaction. And in that space, strength lives. Most people spend their lives seeking external control because they never learned internal control. They try to manipulate circumstances constantly so they can feel temporarily secure, but life refuses to remain stable forever. Problems arrive, people disappoint you, plans fail, seasons change. Stoicism does not promise protection from reality. It teaches preparation for reality. The disciplined mind becomes prepared for uncertainty because it no longer depends entirely on comfort to feel stable. This is why Stoic strength feels different from ordinary confidence. Ordinary confidence often depends on success, approval, or favorable circumstances. Stoic confidence comes from self-mastery, from knowing that no matter what happens externally, you have trained yourself to respond with awareness instead of emotional chaos. That creates a deeper kind of certainty, quiet certainty, the kind that does not need attention to feel real. Look around the modern world carefully. Most people are mentally exhausted not because life is impossible, but because they are internally unprepared. Their minds are overstimulated, their emotions are undisciplined, their attention is scattered, their identity depends entirely on external validation. And because of this, they remain fragile psychologically. Stoicism offers another path entirely, a path of stillness, of self-control, of internal order, of resilience built privately instead of performance displayed publicly. It teaches that true power begins the moment you stop trying to control the world and start learning how to control yourself. That is why these mornings matter. That is why silence matters. That is why awareness matters. Because before you face the world externally, you must first face yourself internally. And most people spend their entire lives avoiding that confrontation. But the Stoic walks directly toward it. Every morning he enters silence deliberately. Every morning he sharpens awareness before distraction arrives. Every morning he reminds himself of the principles that keep him grounded while the world becomes increasingly chaotic. Today, I control my reactions. I focus only on what matters. I choose courage over comfort. I am grateful even for the struggle. Every experience teaches me. These are not merely affirmations, they are anchors. They keep the mind steady during emotional storms. They remind you who you are before the world attempts to shape you into someone weaker, distracted, fearful, or emotionally dependent. Because the modern world constantly pulls people away from themselves, away from discipline, away from clarity, away from stillness. Stoicism pulls you back inward, back toward awareness, back toward self-respect, back toward internal strength. And perhaps this is why Stoicism continues surviving thousands of years later, because human nature has not changed as much as people believe. Fear still exists, ego still exists, suffering still exists, distraction still exists, but so does the possibility of mastery. The possibility of becoming stronger than impulse, wiser than emotion, calmer than chaos, more disciplined than circumstance. That possibility exists every single morning, the moment you wake up. Before the world touches your mind, there is a choice waiting for you. Will you live reactively or deliberately? Will you strengthen discipline or feed weakness? Will you seek comfort or build character? Will you allow the world to define your inner state, or will you reclaim ownership over your own mind? That decision shapes more than your morning. It shapes your entire life. Because the man you become tomorrow is being trained by the thoughts you repeat today. And eventually, after enough mornings lived with awareness instead of chaos, you become something modern society rarely produces anymore. A calm man, a disciplined man, a resilient man, a man whose peace does not collapse every time life becomes difficult, a man who carries stillness into chaos instead of absorbing chaos into himself. That is the real goal of Stoicism, not perfection, inner command. And every sunrise gives you another opportunity to build it,